The sun dipped below the horizon as the last train rolled into the quiet town of Greystone. Its arrival was marked by the rhythmic screech of iron wheels on the old tracks and the gentle hiss of steam. Among the few passengers disembarking was Nolan Harper, a middle-aged man in a wool coat and weathered boots, carrying a battered suitcase. Nolan wasn't there for leisure or business. He had come for a single purpose, a purpose steeped in shadows and secrecy. As he stepped onto the dimly lit platform, he was greeted by two men. One was Amos, the stout and jovial proprietor of the local hardware store. The other, tall and lean with a perpetual frown, was Arthur Reed, the town's librarian. "Glad you made it," Amos said, shaking Nolan's hand with a grip firm enough to crush bones. "I didn't have much choice," Nolan replied, his tone grim. Arthur adjusted his round glasses. "Let's not waste time. The others are waiting." The gathering. The trio walked briskly through the cobbled streets of Greystone, their breaths forming clouds in the chilly evening air. They reached an unassuming building on the outskirts of town. It was once a factory, now repurposed into a meeting hall. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. 4 other men were already there, seated around a long oak table. There was Elias, a retired schoolteacher with an encyclopedic memory. Victor, the blacksmith, whose strength was as legendary as his temper. Caleb, a quiet but sharp-minded farmer. And Henry, the youngest, an apprentice clockmaker with a knack for solving puzzles. Nolan set his suitcase on the table and opened it. Inside was an ancient, leather-bound book secured with brass clasps. The cover was embossed with strange symbols, and the air around it seemed to hum with an unseen energy. "Is that it?" Elias asked, leaning forward. Nolan nodded. "The Codex Umbra. It's real." The room fell silent. The Codex. The Codex Umbra had been a legend in Greystone for centuries. It was said to contain knowledge from a forgotten era, secrets too dangerous for ordinary men to wield. According to folklore, the book had been hidden away to protect the world from its contents. Nolan had spent years tracking it down, following cryptic clues and whispered rumors. Now, the responsibility of deciphering its mysteries lay with the 7 men gathered in that room. "We need to be careful," Arthur warned. "This isn't just a book. It's a key." "A key to what?" Henry asked, his youthful curiosity barely contained. "To something best left locked away," Arthur replied. The first cipher. Nolan opened the codex, revealing pages filled with intricate diagrams, ancient scripts, and symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The first page contained a riddle written in an archaic language. Elias squinted at the text. "I recognize some of these words. It's Old High Arcanum, a precursor to modern Latin." Arthur nodded. "Can you translate it?" Elias took a piece of paper and began jotting down notes. After a few minutes, he read aloud, "To open the path, align the 7. To break the seal, light the flame unseen." "What does that mean?" Victor asked, his voice gruff. "Align the 7, Henry murmured. "Could it mean us?" "Possibly," Nolan said. "But what's this about an unseen flame?" Amos, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "There's an old lantern in my store, passed down from my grandfather. He used to say it could light what others couldn't see." "That's a good place to start," Nolan said. The lantern. The group followed Amos to his store. He retrieved the lantern from a locked cabinet in the back. It was made of brass with a glass chamber that had a faint blue tint. Amos lit the lantern, and the flame burned a brilliant azure. When they brought it near the codex, the symbols on the second page began to glow. "We're on the right track," Arthur said. The second page contained another riddle, this one accompanied by a map of Greystone. The map was different from any they had seen before. It showed hidden paths and landmarks that didn't exist on modern maps. "Looks like we're going on a little adventure," Victor said, cracking his knuckles. The Forgotten Path. The map led them to an overgrown trail on the outskirts of Greystone. The trail wound through the woods, the trees growing denser and the air colder with each step. The lantern's blue flame illuminated symbols carved into the bark of certain trees, guiding their way. After hours of trekking, they reached a clearing. At the center was a stone pedestal, covered in moss and vines. On top of the pedestal lay a metal plate engraved with more symbols. Nolan placed the codex on the plate, and the ground beneath them rumbled. The pedestal sank into the earth, revealing a spiral staircase leading down into darkness. "This feels like a bad idea," Caleb muttered. "Probably is," Amos said, stepping onto the staircase. "But we're here now." The underground chamber. The staircase led to a vast underground chamber, its walls lined with carvings that depicted strange, otherworldly creatures and events. At the center of the chamber was a stone altar, surrounded by 7 pillars. The codex began to glow, and its pages flipped open on their own, stopping at a page with a diagram of the altar and pillars. Elias studied the diagram. "Each pillar corresponds to one of us. We need to stand by them." The men took their positions, and the codex's glow intensified. Symbols on the pillars lit up, and the air was filled with a low, resonant hum. "What now?" Victor asked. "Light the unseen flame," Nolan said, holding up the lantern. He placed it on the altar, and the blue flame spread to the pillars, connecting them with shimmering lines of light. The test. As the light spread, the chamber began to change. The walls seemed to ripple, and the carvings came to life, showing scenes of ancient civilizations and battles against monstrous beings. The codex emitted a beam of light that projected another riddle onto the altar. "Prove your worth to guard the gate. Face the trials, or seal your fate." Before anyone could react, the chamber shifted again. Each man found himself alone in a separate section of the chamber, faced with a personal trial. Victor was tested on his strength, forced to hold up a collapsing pillar until the light freed him. Elias faced a memory puzzle, piecing together fragments of ancient history. Henry had to dismantle and rebuild a complex mechanism under pressure. Each trial tested a unique skill, and one by one, the men overcame their challenges. The final seal. When they regrouped, the codex displayed one last instruction: align the 7, speak the vow. The men formed a circle around the altar, their hands resting on its surface. The codex's pages turned, revealing the vow in glowing text. "We, the keepers of the Cipher, vow to protect the knowledge entrusted to us. We shall guard the gate and ensure the balance remains." As they spoke, the words in unison, the chamber filled with light. The pillars rose higher, forming a protective barrier around the altar. The codex closed itself, its glow fading. The Keepers. When the men emerged from the underground chamber, the sun was rising. The codex was once again locked, its secrets secured. "What now?" Henry asked. "We keep our vow," Nolan said, "and we make sure no one else ever finds this place." The 7 men returned to their lives, bound by a shared purpose. They were no longer ordinary townsfolk. They were the Cipher Keepers, guardians of a legacy older than time itself. And though they carried the weight of their knowledge in silence, they knew their duty was far from over. The morning fog hung low over the deserted airstrip. Samuel Tanner adjusted his black duffel bag and checked his watch. 5:45 a.m. He wasn't sure if he was early or late. Timing was always vague when it came to covert meetings. The air smelled of dew and jet fuel, though no planes had used this old strip in years. Soon, the faint hum of an approaching vehicle reached his ears. A black SUV emerged from the mist, headlights cutting through the haze like twin spears. Samuel straightened his posture as the car came to a halt, and 3 men stepped out, their movements deliberate. The leader, a tall man with piercing blue eyes and a face that looked like it was carved from stone, approached Samuel. He extended a gloved hand. "Mr. Tanner," the man said, "I'm Agent Collings. Glad you could make it." Samuel shook the hand, feeling the strength in the grip. "I wasn't given much of a choice, was I?" Collings smirked, but didn't reply. Instead, he gestured toward the back of the SUV. Two men brought out a steel briefcase and placed it on the hood of the car. "Before we proceed, I need to confirm something," Collings said. "You've dealt with sensitive materials before. This will be unlike anything you've ever seen." "I've handled my fair share," Samuel replied curtly. Collings nodded. He opened the briefcase, revealing a black device the size of a hardcover book. It had a matte finish with no visible buttons or screens, only a glowing white ring at its center. "This," Collings said, "is the keystone." The keystone. Samuel leaned closer, examining the device. "What does it do?" "Officially, I can't tell you. Unofficially, it's a key. A very dangerous one," Collings replied. "Dangerous how?" "Imagine a lock holding back something the world isn't ready for, something no one should have access to. This device can open that lock, or, in the wrong hands, destroy it." Samuel's eyebrows furrowed. "Why bring me into this?" "You're one of the best retrieval specialists in the game," Collings said, "and because of your background." Collings didn't elaborate, but Samuel understood. His past as a military operative had been buried under layers of classified files, but people like Collings always found a way to dig up old graves. "What's the job?" Samuel asked. Collings glanced at his team before answering. "We need you to transport the keystone to a secure facility. The details of its location are encoded. Only you will have the access key." "And why not transport it yourself?" "We've had breaches," Collings admitted. "Some of our own have been compromised. If they know we're involved, the mission's dead before it starts." The first move. Samuel took the job. By the next morning, he was driving a nondescript van through a rural stretch of highway. The keystone sat in a locked compartment in the back, and a burner phone provided him with cryptic instructions, checkpoints, rendezvous points, and constant updates on possible threats. At the first checkpoint, he met Marcus, a rugged man with a scruffy beard and a scar running down his cheek. Marcus handed Samuel a folder. "You're being tailed," Marcus said bluntly. Samuel glanced in the side mirror. A silver sedan had been keeping pace with him for the last 10 miles. "Friend of yours?" Samuel asked. "Hardly," Marcus replied. "We've intercepted communications. Whoever they are, they're good. Better than we expected." "Great," Samuel muttered. The chase. An hour later, the silver sedan made its move. It accelerated suddenly, closing the gap between it and Samuel's van. A passenger leaned out of the window, holding a weapon that didn't look like any standard firearm. The first shot missed, but the second hit the van's rear, causing a sudden jolt. The dashboard lights flickered as Samuel fought to keep control of the vehicle. "Not today," Samuel growled, slamming on the brakes. The van screeched to a halt, and the sedan swerved to avoid collision. Samuel jumped out, drawing a pistol from his holster. He fired 2 quick shots at the sedan's tires, disabling the vehicle. The attackers, 2 men dressed in tactical gear, emerged and opened fire. Samuel took cover behind the van, returning fire with calculated precision. The skirmish was brief. Samuel's experience outweighed the attackers' aggression. When the dust settled, the 2 men lay incapacitated, and Samuel was already back in the van, speeding away. The interception. Samuel reached the next rendezvous point, an abandoned motel off the beaten path. Collings was waiting there, flanked by 2 new agents. "You weren't kidding about the breaches," Samuel said as he approached. Collings frowned. "We've confirmed the attackers were from an unknown paramilitary group. They're not locals." "Then who are they?" We don't know yet, but they're well-funded and organized. This operation has been compromised. We're adjusting the plan. What does that mean for me? You're taking a detour, Collings said, handing Samuel a new map. The unexpected ally. Samuel's detour took him through a dense forest where he encountered an unexpected figure, James Rook, an old comrade from his military days. "What are you doing here?" Samuel asked, lowering his guard slightly. "Helping you," James replied. "Collings didn't tell you everything, did he?" "Of course not," Samuel said. "Why are you involved?" "I've been tracking this group for months," James explained. "They're not just after the Keystone. They want what it protects. If they get it, we're looking at global consequences." The safe house. With James now part of the mission, the two men reached a safe house deep in the mountains. The facility was small but equipped with advanced surveillance systems and weapons caches. James revealed more about the Keystone's importance. It's not just a key, it's a data repository. Inside are the coordinates to something called the Nexus. The Nexus, Samuel echoed. A facility buried somewhere in the Arctic. It's said to house technology that predates humanity. And why would anyone want that? Power, James replied grimly. The kind of power that can reshape the world. The final assault. Their safe house didn't stay safe for long. At midnight, alarms blared, signaling an impending attack. Drones swarmed the perimeter, followed by heavily armed soldiers. "They found us," James said, grabbing his rifle. Samuel secured the Keystone and prepared for battle. The safe house became a war zone as the two men defended it against waves of attackers. Despite their skill and determination, the odds were against them. The attackers breached the perimeter, forcing Samuel and James to retreat deeper into the forest. The last stand. Under the cover of darkness, Samuel and James set up an ambush. They lured the attackers into a narrow canyon where they used explosives to create a rock slide. The plan worked, but at a cost. James was injured in the chaos, and Samuel was left to carry both the Keystone and his wounded ally. "We can't keep this up," James said weakly. "We don't have to," Samuel replied. "We just need to make it to the extraction point." The extraction. As dawn broke, Samuel reached the extraction point, a secluded helipad where Collings and his team were waiting. Samuel handed over the Keystone, his face a mix of relief and exhaustion. "You did good, Tanner," Collings said. "What happens now?" Samuel asked. "We'll secure the Keystone and ensure the Nexus remains hidden," Collings replied. "And the people who attacked us? We'll deal with them," Collings said, his tone cold. The aftermath. Samuel watched as the helicopter carrying the Keystone disappeared into the horizon. He turned to James, who was being treated by medics. "What now?" James asked. "We rest," Samuel said, "and hope we never have to do this again." But deep down, Samuel knew the world was full of shadows, and the fight was far from over.